scary stories. Before we get into today's stories, if you're new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. And if you are already subscribed, welcome back and thank you for subscribing. Okay, now with that out of the way, let's get into today's video.
The story I want to share with you happened 1 year ago, not long after the beginning of the first semester. I was 20 by then, and I used to hang out near my university a lot at this time of the year, because the weather was still really nice and warm, and my university was adjacent to the park. As we had a 3-hour break, a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to eat lunch in the park rather than in the cafeteria. I said yes, and we just went there. It was a regular school day, probably a Thursday, and the place was filled with kids, students, and people walking their dogs. It may seem odd to underline this, but I rarely go by myself in a park if there's no one else around, because it makes me feel nervous, kind of vulnerable. But this day, the place was crowded, and we hardly managed to find a place somewhere on the grass for us to sit. We ate, talked, and enjoyed the sunny weather for a good hour. After an hour, the park was way emptier than when we arrived. Almost all the children had left, and we were quite on our own, as we both wanted to smoke a little before returning to class. And now that we wouldn't bother anyone with the smoke, we rolled 2 joints. I know it's not especially a good thing, but it was our little habit when we hanged out together. Anyways, the past belongs to the past, right? I was focused on rolling up when my friend suddenly asked me, "Do you see them?" I looked in the same direction as her, but I couldn't see what she was talking about. She insisted, "Those guys, with the bag." They were staring at us, and then I saw them. 50 meters away from us, 2 guys who seemed a little older than us were standing in the middle of the way, looking intensely at us. They had literally no expression on their face. I'm kind of used to creepy men, whether they are polite or much more intrusive. You know, those who follow you in the streets, those who inexplicably stare at you in the bus for 30 minutes, those who won't leave your side until you give them your number. It can be really easy to get rid of them, but those kind of encounters are often awkward, embarrassing, or even worse. So I felt a little uncomfortable, although I wasn't worried. As I kept looking at them, I understood that they were going to talk to us. I asked my friend if she knew them, and she answered no, adding that she hoped that they would not come over to say hi. Unfortunately, 3 minutes later, they were right in front of us, smiling. 2 of them talked to us at first, introducing themselves as Manny. He was a small and short-haired guy who was obviously on drugs, but I wouldn't know which ones, to be honest. The other was a tall, pale, quiet guy. I really can't remember his name. Let's call him Steve to make things easier. Manny talked and smiled a lot. He introduced himself and his friend, asked us about our day, praised the warm temperature. He seemed either unable to shut up or desperately trying to play it cool with us. Before we could even tell them to leave, he invited himself to join us on the grass, assuming that we would be okay with it. As a welcoming gift, he opened up his bag. It was a huge plastic bag, one you would take to do some grocery shopping with, and showed us a 4.5-liter bottle of vodka. I couldn't help but be judging them. It was like 1 p.m. in the park, in daylight, so it kind of felt ridiculous to me. His friend handed us a tiny and already used paper cup, but we declined the offer, saying that we needed to stay sober because we had classes to attend 2 hours later. Unfortunately, they had already drank a fair amount of vodka, and they kept insisting until my friend told them I'm not the type of person who would drink vodka right after lunch. I either drink it on Friday night with my friends, or pass my turn. Don't ask again. I should tell you now, my friend is not a scaredy cat at all. To be honest, she's the bravest person that I've ever met, and she's never uncomfortable in front of strangers. Unfortunately, when she's bothered by a weird guy, she either acts weirder than him to make him feel uncomfortable, or just laughs it off, making jokes and acting friendly until she tells him to leave because she'd rather be alone. Or in the worst cases, she kicks his ass and leaves. So even if she didn't want their company, she was still pretty relaxed, way more than I was. and it felt good to have her by my side. They must have felt that she was serious because they stopped insisting. And instead, they started to ask us things like, "Are you students? Do you have a boyfriend? Can I have your number?" and so on. We were both in a relationship and not interested in the two of them, but it didn't stop them from flirting. They kept complimenting us in a heavy, unpleasant, clumsy way, and we began to feel embarrassed. We could clearly tell that alcohol was unleashing them. They were annoyingly enticing, openly flirty, and it escalated quickly from sympathetic remarks on the way we were dressed to nasty sexual advances. As I said, we were not interested, but they didn't take no as an answer. I was so uncomfortable that I avoided eye contact as much as I could while trying to find a way for us to get out of this situation. At this point, two other guys, who were supposedly their friends, came and sat with us, even though we didn't tell them that they could. They looked dirty, idle, and stoned, and one of them had a scrawny dog full of fleas. Not really reassuring, but we kept our thoughts for ourselves. My friend said something like, "We should probably go back to college now," but it didn't work the way that we planned. They offered to come with us, claiming that it was not the first time that they crashed classes, just for fun. We replied, "No thanks. We don't want to get into any trouble." But Manny insisted yet again. We declined, and he kept insisting, saying, "Don't worry, it's no big deal." Suddenly, he pulled a gun out of his pants and brandished it in front of us, with a proud expression on his face. We immediately stopped smiling. First, because we live in France. Carrying guns is neither allowed nor usual. And second, because we felt trapped. The gun looked old but real, heavy and extremely dangerous in his drunken hands. It was not funny anymore. I was genuinely afraid of what would happen next. One of its friends, the one with the dog, let's call him Nick, suddenly started to panic, got up and said, "Are you fucking crazy? Don't you know I got heroin on me?" To which Manny replied, "Chill out. There are no cops here." His friend shook his head, took his bag, ready to get out of here. Then Manny pretended to be aiming at Steve, and he told us with a big carnivorous smile that he would totally shoot him without being in trouble. Steve seemed a little bit nervous. Nick walked away, yelling that he didn't want to be seen with us because it was too risky, and I couldn't disagree more. We were in the middle of the day, in an almost empty park, so the scene seemed quite unreal. I just thought, crap, I'd never been this close to a gun. And its owner is a drunk man who doesn't want us to go. It looked pretty bad. He turned towards us, exhibited the weapon, and asked for our opinion. "Do you like it?" "I'm not a huge fan of guns," I replied. "Are you scared?" "Maybe I am." I tried my best to hide the fact that I was scared because I didn't want him to notice it, and to take advantage of me. Even my friend kept a smile on her face to keep up appearances. He quickly put it back in his pants and stared at us for a long time with a wary eye. After what he strangely asked, "What did you see?" I figured he was talking about the gun, but I couldn't understand why he would ask such a thing, with such a suspicious tone at that. He asked again, so I said I saw nothing, and then he laughed. My answer may seem stupid, but I didn't want him to feel proud, or to give him this kind of power over us by letting him know that we were afraid of the weapon. I thought it was stupid to carry a gun and to point it at his friend, but he simply kept laughing, and his laugh sounded awful to my ears, like the one of a cold-blooded sociopath. I was so nervous that my hands were shaking. My friend must have noticed it because all of a sudden, she took my arm and told everyone, "Oh crap, we're late. We must go. Have a nice day," before running away. They shouted, "Can we have your number at least?" And she replied without even looking back, "No, but have a nice day anyway." We never walked so fast to get to class, even though we ended up not attending the lecture because our teacher was sick, and we didn't even know this. We were still so astounded by what just happened that it took us several hours to process, and after that, we avoided the park for a long period of time. So to the drunk, creepy guys at the park, who had a gun for no reason whatsoever, we really hope that we never meet you guys again.
I was working at a fabric and craft store when I encountered who I am going to call Neckbeard. The first time we met, he was needing help getting something off of a shelf and wandered to my side of the store the fabric side. Of course, I go and help him, and it's customary at the store to ask, "What are you working on?" He tells me he makes what I can only describe as nerd stuff to sell at conventions. I tell him that's super cool, and I am a cosplayer myself and attend many conventions. He thanks me and goes on his way. The next week he shows up on the same day, comes right over to me. We aren't busy, so we strike up a conversation about cosplaying, and he asked if I could help him with one he wanted to work on. I asked to see a picture, and it's essentially a muscle suit with a loincloth. Immediately after showing me, he jumps into, "I can't pull it off though. I'm too fat to pull it off." And of course I start telling him how cosplay is for everybody, and he can wear whatever he wants. He asks again if I can help him sometime with it, and that he would pay me a lot of money to. I decline, but he scribbles down his number. "In case you change your mind." I threw it away. The next day he comes in again. This time we're busy, and makes a beeline right for me. I was putting fabric away in the back corner of the store, and instantly starts berating me. "Why didn't you call me? I gave you my number so you could call me. I told you I would give you a lot of money." I quickly look around, and there's nobody, just me, 5'2", and Neckbeard, who's a very big guy. I start to tell him I need to go back to the counter, and he's stopping me and backing me up further into the corner. I have no idea what to do or how to flag anyone down. Then I remember the headset we all wear, and I just push the talk button, and between him yelling at me, I would say things like, "Sir, I really need to get out of the fleece section and go back to the counter." Soon an employee came and saw what was going on and said, "OP, it's time for your break. Hurry up." And she grabbed my arm and whisked me away. I had to write up an incident report with my manager, who decided to not ban this guy from the store. So instead, whenever he came in, people would use a code over the headset to let me know to go sit in the back until he left. It worked for a while until one day we were really busy. I was a manager myself now and was running a register. I didn't look up and just called the next person. That's when I heard, "Wow, I haven't seen you in a while." And I looked up and saw it was Neckbeard. I put on my best fake smile and just said, "Oh, my schedule's changed a lot. I work another job now." He asked me where, and I just told him, in the strip mall. Of course, I wasn't going to tell him the actual place. I thought it was over until right before he left, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Well, when you're off tonight, you should give me a call." I had to be walked to my car after my shift and switched to overnights, so I never see him again. I still live in fear I'll see him at a convention sometime and worry what I'll do if I do.
As some of you may know, I am an armed uniformed security officer in my city. Well, 2 years ago, my company was providing services for a motel named the Knight's Inn. The motel was preparing to shut down for a massive remodel as well as code and structural updates. Now, the motel was previously 2 separate motels, but when the Knight's Inn bought it, they merged the properties into one. During nearly 20 years of running both of the original motels, they saw some rather negative events. This location just happened to be within walking distance from the county jail. So when a number of persons were released from custody, they found their way to this motel over the years. Murders, drug overdoses, and suicides were all reported on this property. All these dark events left negative imprints on these grounds. Fast forward to when I worked on the property during the overnight hours. and the 3 events during 3 separate shifts I worked, and the one I responded to as a cover officer. The first on my 4th shift. The first few went very slow and boring. No one had told my staff of the history of the property at this point. Well, the second to the last week of operation, I was helping the on-duty auditor prepare the morning breakfast bar, and the kitchen was in part of the building where a long shutdown restaurant was. The auditor was preparing waffle batter and filling pitchers of orange juice when an unopened 12-pack of canned soda exploded next to a service access stairwell that was padlocked from the inside of the service hallway to the kitchen. The auditor's scream was chilling as well as deafening. Well, due to some of the less upstanding guests they rent rooms to. I began down the stairs to find that the doors were still secured, and no one could have entered through it. I then stuck my finger in the puddle of soda, thinking that maybe it had been overheated, or something caused them to burst. But no, it was slightly cool. As I looked at the auditor, still shaking, holding a small kitchen knife trying to calm her down, we both heard a little loud girl giggle, but it sounded unusual. Needless to say, we both bolted from the kitchen back to the main desk. 5 minutes later, the auditor told me, "No one who checked in tonight has any kids." The following week, and the last of the location being open before the remodel, I was doing standard ground patrolling, making sure no doors were unsecured or people were fighting. Just about the time I finished, I get a call from the front desk, calling a Code 6 priority. I ran back to the office, nearly tripping on the stairs in the courtyard. Once I arrived, I saw a young black woman with her daughter. Just the cutest little 3-year-old you'll ever see. The mother was crying uncontrollably, but managed to tell me her husband was not himself. That after nearly an hour in their room, he pulled a knife out of nowhere and started wildly swinging it in the room, and at his wife and child. The wife said that he hates weapons and wouldn't have had one, so I began searching the grounds for the man, and found him sitting in a dark corner of the courtyard area. He had the knife in his hand, and was blankly staring ahead. Once the knife hit the light, I saw blood. When I noticed he was bleeding, I ordered that he drop the knife as he slowly started to walk towards me. I repeated a second time. Then on the third order, I drew my weapon, and ordered that he stop, and to think about his child. Right as I did, 3 local officers sprang from behind me, 2 with their CEWs, which are tasers. In a quickly happening display, I heard the deputy order, then followed, taser, taser, taser. The local officers took the man in custody, and was having me fill out a statement when I overheard 2 of the deputies saying, "Want to know what's odd? The room they are staying in has had a suspicious death a few years ago, but detectives say it was a drug-induced suicide." The other deputy replied, "Huh? What are the odds this guy went nuts?" I think personally that that's a little odd, especially that a man committed suicide. Come to find out, he cut his arm till he bled out, and then a week later another man loses his mind, cuts himself up, and is unresponsive the whole time he is being spoken to. The most damning paranormal event, in my opinion, that happened was the first week closed for remodeling. I was walking around the inside, and another officer stopped in to hang out on his break. I made the suggestion that he sit in the old restaurant and see if the place was for real haunted. He reluctantly agreed, using a spirit box app on my phone that before that night, I thought I overpaid for it. We sat and asked questions. For about 20 minutes, nothing came through, and we joked that maybe the place wasn't haunted after all. I thought I saw something across the room, so I tried to light it, but come to find out my flashlight had died. So while sitting at the table, I pulled my taser out of the holster as we sat in a nearly pitch-black room to use its light if needed. Instantly, the spirit box app said, "Yellow? Gun?" in the same voice. Now mind you that me and this other officer had the same level of training, and were fully certified through the city. But his response was, "The fuck does it mean by yellow gun?" I then proceeded to place my taser on the table, and turned its light on. I've never heard so many F-bombs as he stormed out of that room. The final incident I am unsure of, but the one phrase the suspect yelled, "There will be more ghosts here tonight if you enter." 4 weeks after the motel closed, I was working a city patrol when the on-duty officer called for priority backup from all available officers on duty. Sam 626, the night's end. What is the situation? 4 to 6 people have entered into the back building and barricaded themselves into a room. I was the first responding officer just after 3 a.m. and met with the on-duty site officer. As we were talking, and a third officer arrived, we heard 3 gunshots ringing out from down the hallway. At this time, we contacted the local sheriff's office about the situation. Within several minutes, deputies arrived in ASV, active shooter vests, and helmets. They attempted to reach the room as we watched from in the hallway. 5 more shots rang out from the doorway, and luckily no one was struck. The deputies fell back to the end of the hallway where the 3 of us were. A survivor for the deputies orders forward to watch the hallway as the rest took position around the building. We asked what we needed to do, and he replies to block the entrances to the property, and no one comes on that isn't an officer. So basically we were to keep out the impending reporters. SWAT arrived, and the deputies pulled back, and SWAT took their position. The whole time the suspects saw the activity from the window and holes in the door. An LT with SWAT and a public relations officer came over to me, and the other guys on my staff. And while asking us what happened before deputies responded, we all heard from a broken-out window, "There will be more ghosts here tonight if you enter." Around 5 a.m., a SWAT armored vehicle pulled up next to the back of the building, and we hear 3 thumps. SWAT shot OC shells into the room before breaching from the windows and doorway. Just as soon as we hear the thumps and see the smoke, 5 of the suspects were being carried out, and a 6th was being rushed out on a straight board to an ambulance. Come to find, the man with a pistol in the room took his 5 friends hostage and attempted to kill himself when SWAT breached. He later died at the hospital, so I wonder if he joined the other ghosts in the motel. After that night, we no longer provided security at the Night's Inn. 8 months later, it reopened as some new aged hipster hotel. I haven't been on that property for some time now, even though I pass it whenever I work our South City patrol. I wonder how the property is, and if paranormal activity still happens after the remodel.
This happened about a week ago. A little background. I am a cosplayer and a fan of Overwatch. A few months ago, a couple of my friends and I decided to do an Overwatch cosplay for an upcoming con, and being the overachieving idiot that I am, I ended up volunteering to make the cosplays of 5 other people in the group. McCree, Anna, Sombra, Bastion, and Farah, for anyone who's curious. I'm also making Zara for myself. Why am I sharing this? Because the sheer anxiety being brought upon by my locking deadline is the only thing I can think of to excuse why I so stupidly ignored some pretty obvious red flags. So on to the incident. I've taken to frequenting thrift stores whenever I'm pressed for time with a cosplay and can't make anything from scratch, since they are great to pick up some items for very cheap, and that can be altered to look like a part of a costume. This particular night, I found myself at a nearby Salvation Army with my mother in tow. She's the Anna in our group. I was going through the aisles trying to find pieces when I looked up and made an accidental eye contact with an employee. He perked up and made a beeline for me, greeting me and asking me if I needed help. Now this was a little bit odd, as you don't really get that kind of customer service in the Salvation Army, but I figured he was a new and overly eager or something. I explained what I was looking for, and he led me around the store. We didn't find much, and I was ready to thank him and call it a night, when he really quickly asked if I wanted to check out the back. Now, I've been in the back before while dropping off a donation, but I was pretty sure customers weren't allowed there to fiddle with the merchandise. But since crunch time was looming, and he had mentioned that he liked video games in passing, I figured, what the hell? He just wants to be nice and help a fellow geek out. Yeah, I know. The back area like a warehouse and had giant containers filled with things separated by category. I was poking in one filled with hats, seeing if I could find something for McCree, when he suddenly spoke up. "So what kind of boys do you like?" Oh no. Now this particular container was pressed against the back of the wall of the area and had other containers lined up against it in a row, making a sort of sea of merch to one side of me, one of them too close together to squeeze in between. On my other side were some heavy metal storage containers pressed against each other. These two sides formed a sort of little alley way of which this guy was now standing directly in the entrance. I should also probably mention that he was both significantly taller and wider than I am. At first, I tried to pointedly ignore the question and ask him if he had seen any brown cowboy hats, hoping he'd take a hint. He said he hadn't, but asked me the question again. Now normally I don't like the idea of giving a fake excuse to get away from a guy, but his demeanor was slowly changing from awkward to genuinely creepy. It's hard to describe, but he was just a lot more intense and gave off a vibe like this was going exactly as planned for him. So I fumbled my progressively alarmed brain to choose between "I have a boyfriend" or "I'm a lesbian." I went with the lesbian option. I'm not proud of it, but being openly bisexual, it feels like more of a half-truth, and is usually respected in the city I live in. "I have a boyfriend" is usually met with "he doesn't have to know." Of course, this wouldn't be "let's not meet" if my excuse had worked. Rather than just accept it and move on, he fixed his eyes on me and asked, "So, have you ever been with a guy?" When I didn't say anything, he told me his name, which was unisex, but most commonly used for girls, and told me that since it was kind of a girl's name, would it make it okay? I let out an awkward chuckle, but at this point I was not just scared, I was getting pissed. However, odds were not in my favor. If he got violent, and while I considered texting my mother, she had a cart and those weren't allowed in the back, a quick glance at the screen told me he had died sometime before I walked into the back area. Fan-fucking-tastic. The music was also pretty loud, and I didn't think any screaming would carry out far enough to be of help. Luckily, right behind him was a container of shoes, and I acted quickly. I'm not scared of making an ass out of myself, and I let out this giant gasp and pointed. "Oh my god, those are perfect. Move, move, let me see them." I did my best to act as exaggerated as possible, and he was caught off guard enough by my sudden change in demeanor that he took a step back, big enough to let me dart past him. He started to protest, but I grabbed a random pair and turned to him. "You know, my mother is outside in the store. I have to ask her if these are the right size. Thank you so much for letting me look here." And I speed walked my way out of the back room. He followed shortly after and spent the entire time looking sulky. I did end up buying a few things I saw before, but I didn't say anything or ask to see a manager, mostly out of embarrassment. While I know from reading this I may sound like someone in their teens, I am an adult, and finding myself cornered in a stranger danger situation was extremely uncomfortable and shameful. However, I probably will return to that location, and if he does approach me in any way outside of basic customer interaction, I am going to raise hell. So creepy Salvation Army employee, let's not meet again, but if we do, back the hell off, because I'm not getting caught up in that bullshit again.
I'd like to keep this completely anonymous for the safety reasons due to the fact that this just happened. I'm an 18-year-old female, and I just started college. Due to COVID, the majority of my classes are online, so I haven't been able to meet many people. Because of this, I decided to try out Tinder, I matched with some really cool people, and didn't have bad experiences besides the occasional pervy guy asking to hook up. But that's what most people are on Tinder for, right? I really wasn't looking for anything serious, but more just people to talk to and get to know. I ended up matching with someone who was in his mid-20s. We talked for a little bit, and he seemed pretty cool. We had stuff in common, so I added him on my Snapchat. Within a couple of days, he was constantly messaging me. I didn't think much about it, and thought he was lonely, or just really enjoyed talking to me. So I tried to be nice, and answer when I could. My college major is super busy, and time-consuming. I started to get several snaps and texts from him throughout the day, and he would get frustrated when I wouldn't answer right away. I thought that it was weird because I didn't even know him. I told him I was busy with school. He said he understood, and asked if I would try to text him some more. He started calling me baby, and said he needed me. Then he started making sexual comments. I started to get uncomfortable, and told him to stop. He apologized, and said that he wouldn't do it again. A few days later, it happened yet again. He also told me he wanted to drive over an hour to come hang out with me. At this point, I was done with his bullshit. Told him off, and removed him from my Snapchat. He texted me, apologizing, and I just ignored him. About 3 weeks later, he texted me again to apologize, and once again, I ignore it. I haven't heard from him since, but today I was thinking back on it, and decided to look him up on social media. I couldn't find anything. I thought that it was strange that he didn't have any form of social media whatsoever, because most people who don't have social media at least have Facebook, but he wasn't on there either. I was very curious, so I looked up his first and last name on Google, and several articles popped up about him. Earlier this year, he was charged with child porn, and was released on bail. He had nudes on his device of underage girls. I was sick to my stomach. This whole time, I could have found out with a quick Google search what kind of person he really was. But I was too stupid to even think of that. What was even more stupid is that he used his real name on Tinder and on Snapchat. I haven't spoken to him, and I don't plan on it. Thank God I did not meet up with him. If he ever reaches out to me again, or tries to find me, I will contact the authorities and get a restraining order put in place. So creepy dude from Tinder. Let's never meet.
A little backstory. I'm an 18-year-old girl, and unfortunately have a history of encounters like these since I was merely 6. However, this one stood out the most, since it happened at one of the places I used to escape such things. I was at a local anime convention about 4 years ago. Yes, I'm a shameful weeb. And then, it was even worse. I was cosplaying a character from the popular webcomic Homestuck, the alien character who was symbolized by the zodiac sign of Cancer, named Kerkat. It was one of my first times actually buying things and preparing for a cosplay, and I'll admit, I looked a right mess. People liked my expressiveness in pictures, though I got to take a few. Pictures were half the fun of cosplaying anyway. Another part was befriending some of the con attendees and getting to know them. These can create some pretty lasting bonds. I even dated someone I met at a convention, but as these stories always go, those kind of people aren't in today's focus. Enter Alucard. This very tall guy had a very good Alucard cosplay. It seemed like he sunk a lot of time and effort into it. The only thing missing was the hat and goggles. But me, being the nerd that I am, thought he was just playing as Alucard. When I was awakened for the second time, I asked to take his picture, and he obliged. Eventually we started chatting, and in retrospect, I should have analyzed the conversation more carefully. The character Alucard is a vampire for those who don't know, and the alien characters in Homestuck have a variety of blood colors. I was playing around with my friend since middle school who accompanied me cosplaying another alien named Tyrazi, and we joked around about blood colors and stuff. Alucard suddenly decided to butt in with this charming phrase, "I've never tasted alien blood before. Want to give me your neck?" We decided to believe he was just playing and played along in character. Thankfully, in character meant my best friend was very low-key protective of keeping my character's blood color a secret between the two of us. However, consider this strike one against our friend Alucard here. Then the conversation switched back out of character again, and we talked about life outside of cosplay. This guy was apparently in the military and was actually ostracized by his peers. At the time, I couldn't imagine why, aside from the obvious. However, the fact he was in the military told me he was at least 18, way too old to flirt with someone 4 years his junior. The more we talked, however, the more he wanted to see me out of cosplay. He even asked me to take off my wig. My hair at the time was long, curly, easily matted, and hard to get into a wig, so I declined. He kept pressing to see it, though. So I pulled up a picture on my phone. I wish I had paid more attention to his response to that as well. Most people would call me cute or something like that, but he immediately said I looked sexy. It wasn't a risky picture or anything either, just a very boring looking picture of me wearing bright red lipstick. The day went on, and I was getting more and more uncomfortable as we let him accompany our group, which expanded when my other friend from middle school joined in. She was a petite Vietnamese girl, and Alucard low-key creeped on her as well. Fortunately, my always present maternal instincts for her protected her from his grasp. I wasn't so lucky. During the opening ceremonies for the convention, he began flirting with me, even though I told him I had a boyfriend at the time. That wasn't a total lie. I did have a boyfriend, but it was a long-distance relationship across the pond. This didn't deter Alucard, though. Midway through the ceremony, he clamped his hand down on my crotch quite hard, causing my body to seize up in shock, and a response my body hadn't elicited since I was 7. He only chuckled at this and whispered in my ear, "If you want the fucking of your life, just say yes, bitch." I didn't know what to do. I only remember Tarazi saying something like, "Don't fucking touch her," before I blacked out. Turns out my longtime friend went into badass mode and we escaped the packed auditorium safely. We congregated in the girls' room and they calmed me down. And when we all met at Tarazi's house, later we discussed the best course of action. The next day my mother accompanied us and she tracked this guy down. Her awesome mode seemed to activate at this 5'3" woman grabbed someone easily 6'2" by the collar down to meet her line of sight easily and growled, "I'll kill you, motherfucker." When I told my boyfriend about this, he did some research and the guy was actually in his 30s as well as autistic. The latter made me feel as though it were my fault, but my boyfriend reassured me that this guy was still a soldier and still was supposed to have honor and morals regardless of his mental disorder or illness. Besides, I am also autistic and have never done anything as fucked up as that to anyone, younger than me or not. An Alucard cosplayer creeped on me hardcore and tried to plunder my booty. Friends and my mother went into badass mode and saved me, and the guy ended up being a mentally unwell pedophile in the military.
Last month I moved to another country where I didn't know almost anyone. Due to that, I had spent a lot of time alone and started to get bored. Although I didn't, and don't like the concept of Tinder, I decided to create an account just to meet people and spend hours swiping left and swiping right, having brief conversations with my matches, however. Most of them were men that wanted to see me on the same day, which scared me a little bit. Our story begins when I matched with a 30-year-old girl who didn't wait too long to send me a hi, nor ask to send for my phone number. I, who had never used the app before, thought that that was normal, and gave my phone number to her without having spoken at all. That was my first mistake. At first, everything seemed pretty normal. The girl, which we will name Diana, sent me voice notes. We talked briefly and in superficial ways about ourselves. She seemed very, very interested in talking to me, since on several occasions she would double text me when I didn't answer quickly. And I'm not going to lie, I found that pretty curious. However, I paid no attention. The second day of talking to her, she asked me to meet her somewhere. And even though our conversations had been very superficial, I said yes, and we set a place and an hour. But hours before our meet, I regretted it, deleted Tinder, and sent her an apology message. That was where things got weird. She texted me that it was fine, but a few minutes later, she sent me several messages and deleted them within a second so that I wouldn't read them. A couple of hours later, she tried to video call me. I didn't answer and told her I was busy. Despite that, she called me again and again. I kept saying that I was busy, but still, she called me twice at 2 a.m. By that time, I was out and drunk, and I blocked her. I felt a little bad about it, but come on, I'm a woman in her early 20s, living in a foreign country. So at the same time, I felt relief that it was over. Except that it wasn't, and I woke up to a hello from an unknown number, which profile pictures in WhatsApp was one of an old man. I asked him who he was, and in less than a minute, I received an answer. It said, "Hi, it's Diana. This is my dad's number. Why did you block me? Did I annoy you?" Even in despite of how bizarre that was, I tried to empathize with her and answered with the truth. Again, she told me that it was fine, and I blocked her dad's number. In less than 2 hours, I received another message from another unknown number. It said, "Hi, it's Diana. Why do you keep blocking me? I need to talk to you. Please text me." At this point, I no longer find it funny. I tell her that I'm not interested in talking to her, and she literally tells me, "I need to tell you something. There's a girl who is harassing me. She does black magic." I repeat that I'm not interested, and she goes like, "You don't believe me, don't you?" And I blocked her again, for the third time. Anyway, I really don't know if this was some kind of strange joke, but I think I can say that my first experience using Tinder was pretty tragic. I wonder if it's always this way. Though, because I've been thinking about downloading the app again, at least I know that next time I shouldn't share my phone number with anyone I haven't talked to at all. Let's hope for the best. And Diana, you really need to leave me the fuck alone.
Last year I would pick up my sister from school since she didn't have a car and I wasn't going to college. She was 17, I was 19. Now my sister was your typical neckbeard bait. She's fairly attractive, long blonde hair, green eyes, and a great personality. She's a joy to be around and seems to like everyone and everything. She's watched quite a bit of anime and reads a lot of manga. Her friend group was normal, filled with people who fit her interest and personality. I've talked to quite a few of her friends, one of them being my own. They're all chill, really good people, which makes it so weird that the neckbeard was a part of it. Neckbeard wasn't the stereotypical neckbeard in terms of look. He was actually very attractive. He was lean, never smelled like BO, and wasn't greasy. He did, however, have a bit of a neckbeard growing, so by looks, you wouldn't expect it. He liked anime and all of that, but his personality was just god-awful. He was constantly putting others down, subtly, but it was still there. He was a major creep. It was freaky scary how good he was at manipulation, and making it seem like he wasn't degrading his and Elle's friends, as well as Elle, even if he was. Once I met him, I disliked him. I have a lot of experience with people like him, so I knew pretty quickly what type of guy he was. I voiced these concerns to Elle, but she brushed them off, believing there was good in everyone. The first time I met him was when I went to pick up my sister from an after-school club. I forget which one, but Neckbeard was in it too. She asked me to give him a ride home as well, so I decided that since he was her boyfriend, it wouldn't be that bad. Oh ho ho, how wrong I was. Right off the bat, he'd noticed my shirt.
Is that a Green Day shirt? I love them.
Oh really? They were one of my favorite bands.
Yeah, I'd totally love to have a night with the singer, you know, alone. Come to think of it, you kinda look like him. What's your name?
Me, starting to become very uncomfortable. I'm Gerald.
I just love that name. It rolls off of the tongue nicely.
I started to get very uncomfortable now. Elle didn't seem to notice, so I didn't mention it, not wanting to ruin her day. Normally, saying I looked like Billy Joe Armstrong would be an ordinary compliment I'd receive. I'd had the same hair as him and somewhat the same fashion sense, but the comment before the comparison rubbed me wrong, and the part about my name even more so. I stopped the conversation there, and we didn't say anything else to each other until I dropped him off.
Thanks for the ride. Maybe I'll see you later.
He gave me this awkward wink before walking away, and Elle moved to the front seat. I don't fucking like him. He's nice. Once you get to know him, really, Elle replied. She seemed set on that, so I didn't push the topic more. Over the next few months, I'd seen a lot more of Neckbeard. Enough to see that he was not the kind of guy I wanted around Elle, or anyone, really. He was perverted and degrading, and I absolutely despised him. But the encounter I'd like to talk about is what happened on Elle's birthday. She invited all of her friends, including Neckbeard. I'd gotten a hold of some alcohol through my friends where I live. It's illegal to drink underage with consent from parents, and I baked a cake. The whole house was decorated, and everything seemed to be going great. I stayed away from the group, letting Nell have her fun around with her friends, and drank by myself on the couch, making sure that nothing got too bad. I talked to one of mine and Elle's mutual friends. F hung out with me towards the middle, when I started to get drunk enough to act a bit out of character, but not enough to not remember what would happen. Dude, look. F motioned behind me. I looked where he suggested, only to see Neckbeard staring at me from where he sat with Elle and her friends. I looked away. You're all he talks about now, you know. He's got one hell of a crush on you. Oh, really? I've only had like 2 conversations with him. Yeah, it's crazy. It makes Elle hella weirded out. As if he could hear us talking about him, Neckbeard sat next to me on the couch, close enough to have our thighs touching. Hi guys. F. I think Elle is going to start a game of Uno. She wants you to join. F decided to join Elle, giving me a sympathetic look as he left me with Neckbeard. Good God, once we were alone, it started. His hands never left me. They were always on a part of me, whether it was my clothes or actual body parts. I never liked being touched much, so it creeped me out and put me on edge. At this point, though, I was too drunk to be able to do anything about it. Hey, Gerald, you seem to be close with F. Huh? Oh yeah, he's a good friend. His tone, from what I remember, was slightly off, as if he was angry at me. How have you been? You look good. It's been a while since I've seen your pretty face. I shifted away from him then. I remember not wanting to be anywhere near him as he said that. What made it worse was his hand was on my arm. I wanted to vomit. Thanks. Could you please not touch me?
Why? Are you gay?
That was a head spinner at the time. I wasn't out to a lot of people then. Only L, F, and some of my other friends. I asked how he knew that, and he said he saw L texting me about it once. I sighed. Aren't you dating L?
Yeah.
It's recent, and it's not like I'm not allowed to experiment. His hands moved to my thigh, and I attempted to shift away. But I drank a lot by that point that I wasn't anywhere near strong enough to move his 6-foot body with my 5'6" one. He moved to press into me more and grabbed my chin, forcing me to kiss him as I tried to wiggle away. It didn't work. He shifted to move on top of me, his knees pushed against my crotch.
Just let it happen. I promise it'll feel fine.
I started to have a panic attack as memories of past years came back from his actions, and I started to sob. I all but screamed at him to get off, called L's name, and started to thrash around. He seemed to get scared by my actions and jumped off. I don't remember what happened after that, as I was in the middle of a panic attack, but I was told he left, and L and F helped me up the stairs to my room.
I worked at a Tim Hortons all 4 years I was in college, and I had a really sweet teen coworker named Sophie. She was very bright and a little on the short side. Honestly, I thought she was only 14 when she was really 16, almost 17. During a shift one day, she taps me on the shoulder and asks if I can come serve the customer up front right now. I didn't think anything of it at first. I get out there to find a man who was definitely in his mid-20s and of Indian descent. So I just chalked it up to him having a heavy accent as to the reason I was asked to handle his order. As I took and made his order, he was constantly leaning over the counter, peering around looking at the staff members. I noticed Sophie hadn't come from out back yet. I quickly finished his order and wished him a good day. He just sort of nodded, did one more look, and then left. Once he was out the door, Sophie came out and explained he had been randomly showing up there a lot during her shift and would wait until her till was open to order. I understood it was making her uncomfortable, so I just told her if I was on shift to just come grab me and I would deal with his order. This went on for a few months. He never said anything inherently disturbing, so there wasn't really any way to ban him from our location. We soon realized he knew what Sophie's car looked like and would even peek into the store if he didn't see her up front. He would go through the drive-thru in hopes of seeing her. Too bad for him, she was on coffees, and my uncheerful face was always there when he arrived. Finally, one night I was getting off my shift, a late shift, when I saw my older sister outside, confused. I asked what she was doing there, and she told me she was just there with a guy she had been chatting with. Suddenly he appeared and gave my sister a hug. My sister quickly introduced me to him. Somehow, taking my hair out of a pony and throwing my hoodie over my shirt changed my appearance enough that he didn't recognize me. I just nodded a hello and told my sister I was heading home. She followed me back to my car, simply to ask why I was being rude. I straight up told her how the guy had been stalking my coworker, to just the right degree that she couldn't do anything about it at first. My sister wanted to brush it off until I informed her of my coworker's age, and that he knew when she worked. A few days went by, and the guy didn't show up again. I ended up asking my sister about him, and she simply said he hadn't denied it. And then the two had a conversation, and whatever she said scared him off. So, to the Tim Hortons creep, I better never see you near a minor ever again.
This is the story of the time I dated a neckbeard mama's boy. Yeah, It's gonna get interesting. Let me introduce the characters. Me, littlest ghoul, LG, Neckbeard, Gravedigger, Neckbeard's mother, Nancy. I met Gravedigger back in November on Tinder. Obviously, we matched right away. Now, I'm not the prettiest ghoul in the world, so try not to pass judgment on less attractive people. Gravedigger wasn't your typical neckbeard. Yeah, he had a bit of a belly, but he was mostly healthy. He showered every day and used deodorant. The only reason he's classified as a neckbeard is because he has a pretty patchy beard on his lower jaw and neck. He wore a fedora to our first date. He also likes the same things your typical neckbeard would like. But besides all that, Gravedigger seemed like a lovely man. The story takes place back in January after I formally met his mother and stepdad. We went out for the afternoon for a date, going for coffee and seeing the ice sculptures. It was winter in Canada, so we tried to stay inside as much as we could. His mom had invited me over for dinner since the first time I met her was over the holidays, and she never got to sit down with me one-on-one. Nancy was sweet to me the entire dinner. She seemed to approve of me. I was worried because I'm an alternative girl with tattoos and facial piercings, and at the time, bright green hair, whereas she was very conservative. She didn't believe in sex before marriage. She had pictures of Jesus all over her house, and her kids were plain looking against their will. His sister wanted to dye her hair a funky color, but Nancy refused to allow it. His sister is an adult. Nancy asked me your typical questions when you are trying to get to know your child's boyfriend or girlfriend. Did you enjoy the holidays? What did you do? Did you see your family? Do you have siblings? Do you have a job or go to school? It was all fine and dandy. She asked me what I did for work. Now I'm open with people about where I work and what I do. But for a very good reason, this was off-putting for me. See, I work at an adult novelty store. We also do events and demonstrations at alternative bars and clubs. The store is more geared toward alternative lifestyles instead of your run-of-the-mill toys and accessories. But I sucked it up and told her the truth. I didn't want to lie to her, but I also didn't want to tell her the whole truth. I told her I worked at an alternative lifestyle store where we sold everything you'd need for a scene. She was shocked into silence. Gravedigger's sister was curious to learn more about my job and if I took it seriously. I obviously told her I did. You have to when it comes to these things. It's all fun and games until someone gets non-consensually hurt. Now let me preface something before going ahead in the story. Gravedigger was a virgin. He was pushing 30 and has never messed with someone before. He's never even kissed a girl before me, but he was one ready boy. He had things he was into and wanted to try with me, but I told him to educate himself on those things before we tried them. So in short, Gravedigger was one kinky virgin. Now, I'm not saying being a virgin is bad. I personally don't believe in virginity, but each to their own. Now back to the story. Not long after that, I went home. Gravedigger and I talked the entire time it took me to get back home. I was on the bus. He said his mom was still shocked and quiet. When I got home, I had a shower and went to bed since it was late. Usually Gravedigger messaged me in the morning before I got up, but that morning I got nothing. I just thought he decided to sleep in, so I shot him a good morning message instead. I thought it was odd that for the entire day I didn't hear anything from him until that evening. Gravedigger messages me. I don't have the messages anymore, but the conversation went like this.
I have something to tell you, but you gotta promise me you won't be mad.
Okay.
No, promise me you won't be mad.
Okay, I promise I won't be mad. What is it?
Last night, when you left, my mom had more questions about you.
Alright, what does she want to know?
Well, you don't have to answer them.
What did she want to know?
She wanted to know about your sex life. Like, she asked how many partners you've had, if it's only been guys, or if you've been with girls too. She wanted to know about your likes and stuff.
I didn't know what to feel. I was furious and embarrassed all at the same time. This woman asked questions about me she didn't even need to know. I'm open and honest with the person I'm dating, but not their entire family. They don't need to know those things. But wait, it gets better. That's none of her business, you know.
Yeah, about that.
What? Did you...
I answered her questions.
Why? Why would you do that?
She wanted to know.
So you just told her? What did you even tell her?
I told her everything.
Yes, that's right. He told her everything about me and my private life. I felt so violated. I ended up calling him to chew him out about it. I guess his mom was there when I was doing that, and she took the phone away from him. She was downright cruel to me. She called me everything from a slut and a whore to a degenerate. She said I had poisoned her son into having sex before marriage and gotten him into that lifestyle. I practically begged Gravedigger to stand up to his mother, but he was quiet as his mother was tearing into me. Gravedigger said his mom had the right to know those things about me, but I'm guessing deep down he knows she doesn't, since he asked me not to be mad at him when he told me. Gravedigger even sided with his mom. He said he wasn't into the same things I was into until he met me. I told him where to find his balls in his mother's purse, and then I blocked them. Let's just say that wasn't the end of that relationship.